Yes, LinkedIn, we are on here. Let's go.
You know, he challenged me. He said, you should meet 2 or 3 people every day.
We're talking about how to level up on LinkedIn and engagement, being the go-giver, the idea that being open to opportunity.
We're all deal with challenges, but how do you overcome that?
Master Connector with Steve Spiro and Cameron Toth is live on air.
Oh, yes, we are. Gentlemen, my ladies, wherever you're viewing us from, we are excited that you are here today. My master connectors, we're so glad that you're here. And we hope that you are not LinkedIn lurkers, but LinkedIn participators, getting into the comments, letting us know where you're tuning in from. I'm coming to you from Valhalla, New York. My friend, Steve Spiro, the master connector, is coming to you live from Stamford, Connecticut. And Kris Kelso, our fabulous guest today, is coming to you live from right outside of Nashville, Tennessee. I'm going to get on the soapbox just for a moment before we get into tackling the imposter. I just want to talk about climate change and tackling that. If you're in the Northeast, Kris was talking about even seeing it a bit down in Nashville, Tennessee. You're going to see that our environment is being affected by some wildfires to the Northeast, and whether it's wildfires or climate change that may be responsible in some part for these wildfires, and certainly for the 110 temperatures they're experiencing down in Puerto Rico. We want you to understand we all need to be doing more. And I'm throwing myself under that canvas as well, because even though in my office, I take the paper and the bottles and I carry it home because they don't recycle in the office. That's wonderful that I do that. But what else could I be doing? Can I talk to my landlord that I pay rent to, that I have a little bit of sway with, and say, hey, I demand that we have a recycling option here? Yes, I could. And there's probably one thing that you could do today that you could put into your agenda that would push this climate change forward. And if we're all doing one piece, and we talk about this a lot of time on this show, be the light, be the change you want to see in the world. If we do one thing, we'll get a little closer to this goal, because we are at a tipping point. And that tipping point, for in a lot of places, we're already seeing it's gone past it. 110 temperatures day after day in Puerto Rico is a health scare. We're seeing it all over the world. So I'm going to get off the soapbox now, but I just want to put that out there. If you can do one thing to help with this whole climate change thing today, we're pushing towards a really good goal that's really important to all of us and our children. All right. With that said, Steve, get us into a show.
Absolutely. And listen, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And quite frankly, I've been eyeing the Tesla. I like the SUV version. Honestly, it's a pretty cool vehicle. And I knew the Mercedes is coming out with some cool electric vehicles. So definitely very conscious of that. I just waiting for a little bit more infrastructure, but definitely we need to continue to do stuff here. So, but hey, what's up, friends? Steve Spiro, the Master Connector, coming at you live and direct. And hey, Mike, here's a question, right? Did you ever feel inadequate or have self-doubt that many people experience, right? Especially in new or challenging situations. If so, you know, I just had some medical stuff going on, right? Those are symptoms, right? If so, you may be suffering from imposter syndrome. And I know by now it's a pretty common phrase today. It's not, you know, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago was something that was kind of new, but we're going to dig in on this. And it's important to recognize that these feelings that you're having are normal and that everyone experiences them at some point. Everyone, okay? I know I still sometimes I'm on broadcast right now. This is like the shy introverted kid from the Bronx on broadcast. It's so anti what I was about. And so, but here's the thing. One of the ways I've learned to overcome this syndrome, right, is to focus on your strengths and your accomplishments rather than your shortcomings, right? So, you know, in my case, double black belt and, you know, start a company out of college, advertising company in New York City. I mean, I could go on and on, but so again, not thinking, okay, am I good enough for this, but what have you accomplished? And you could also, besides that, you could also seek support and guidance from a mentor. Big believer on the power of mentorship. That has changed my life, changed the trajectory of my life. Or a trusted friend, right? Cameron has been that for me, big time. In fact, I'm very blessed. He came to my home yesterday. The only thing I did to pay him was I paid for a little Chinese, but it was very
I got
blessed.
ice from my big water bottle too. Talking about
Ice and some good water instead of some crappy old tap water from the sink. But listen, having a trusted friend, and he's been a mentor in a lot of ways, technology wise. That was why he came over to get me, to be a little bit more state of the art. I'm still in the 20th century. I'm not even going into the 21st century yet. I'm starting to get there. But the thing is, you could seek support and guidance from that one. But additionally to that, you want to practice self-care and setting realistic goals that can help you boost your confidence. And, I've talked about this, in the sense of having an incredible morning practice. And when you do those kinds of things, you feel great about you. You're separating yourself from the masses. And it tends to reduce those feelings of self-doubt. So remember, it's okay to ask for help and to acknowledge that you don't know everything. And I think that's a big thing, right? A big part of our show is, having, the being authentic and not really, being, not caring that you have inadequacies, right? And when you do that, it brings confidence in you, right? When you acknowledge it and when you speak about it, it's kind of counterintuitive, but it works, right? So it's a great topic we're going to cover today. So if you're ready for our guest, for my co-host, the man himself, the man who does the magic behind the scenes, and I appreciate him big time, more than you know. If you're ready for Cameron to introduce our guest, I'd like you to type in right now, #bring it. Again, we're participants, not lurkers. So Cameron, I'll turn it over to you to introduce our amazing guest.
Absolutely. I'm going to throw Kris Kelso on the screen. The man, Kris Kelso, is a two-time entrepreneur, a professional certified coach, an author, a mentor to business leaders around the world. He's a faculty instructor in the Professional Christian Coaching Institute, an advisor and instructor at the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, and is a contributing writer for Fast Company Magazine, Yahoo Finance, and the Nashville Business Journal. Kris is unusually specific willpower, having not eaten a single donut in the past 17 years. I'm lucky if I haven't eaten a donut in the last 17 minutes. Please welcome to the Master Connector Show, the certified coach of cool, Mr. Kris Kelso.
Hello. Thank you so much, guys. I'm so glad to be here. Looking forward to this conversation. It's going to be fun.
That's awesome.
I warned you about Cameron. Most people want to take him home with them.
He's a good hype man. I need him to come around and introduce me to people.
We get the people going, get the people jumping.
That's right. That's right.
That's it. Sure.
Steve, man, get us started on this conversation.
No doubt about it. So type in community #imposter, right? Because we're going to talk about that. And so, Kris, we want to definitely ask you a question here, right? We want to dive into this. So, did you ever feel imposter syndrome? Silly question. I'm sure the answer is yes, but how did you overcome it?
Yeah. So a little bit of my story. I started my first business in my early 30s. I was 31 and I had no business training whatsoever. In fact, I didn't even go to college. I don't have a college degree. I've never taken a college class and I just had to sort of figure it out. And I remember going to a large bookstore. Remember those? We used to have large bookstores. And I bought a stack of books covering everything I thought I needed to know to run a small business. It was an IT consulting firm that I originally started. And so I just read a bunch of books and started a company and then eventually hired some people. And I grew that to 7 figures in revenue and was just really, everything I did, I was just figuring it out as I went. And all along the way, there was this persistent voice in the back of my head that would constantly try to tell me that I didn't know what I was doing, that my success wasn't real, that eventually somebody was going to figure out that I didn't, actually know what I was doing, and that if that happened,
the success isn't real, right? That the idea that you're doing it, but somehow it's all a house of cards kind of thing. It's just a dream kind of thing. Cause I think, and you go through a day and you're saying, I was busy, I did things, but then you're sitting there like, did I really get anything done? Right. And I think everybody's been there.
And imposter syndrome, it's important to note that it's the feeling that you doubt your success despite the evidence to the contrary. So there's evidence that you're successful, but you have this voice in the back of your head that just keeps trying to convince you that, that's not real. You can't believe that stuff. It's all a fluke. It's all just a bunch of happy accidents. And at some point that your luck is going to run out and you're going to fall short. So I definitely felt that as an entrepreneur. And when I learned about imposter syndrome, it was many years later. It was like a huge weight lifted off my shoulders just to hear that it was a thing and that lots and lots of people experienced it. And in fact, statistically, it tends to be more prevalent among high achievers. So entrepreneurs, innovators, people that are pushing the boundaries, people that are getting outside their comfort zone and stretching themselves are more likely to feel like a fraud at times. And so learning about that was such a relief. But then I started studying it because I wanted to really understand that mind game, that psychological trick that happens to us, and how to counteract it, how to overcome it. And so I initially started studying it for myself, eventually started working with a lot of my clients and fellow entrepreneurs, colleagues, people I knew. And the more I talked to people about it, the more I realized how widespread and prevalent it was. And that eventually, of course, led to me writing a book about this topic and all the things that I've learned.
And what's the name of that book? Look at that over your shoulder there.
Yeah, it's very subtle here in the background. It's called Overcoming the Imposter, Silence Your Inner Critic and Lead with Confidence.
There you go. Good stuff.
Hey, Steve, I just want to shout out the folks that are getting into the chat. So Yolanda, thank you so much. Loyal community member here. We appreciate you. Jeff Cunningham, thanks for getting in there. Yolanda's coming to us from Frisco. Jeff from Miami, Florida. And then it's Jacqueline, right? You're not showing up in the comments, Jacqueline. Your name isn't there because you got to go to StreamYard.com/Facebook in order to show up in the comments. So I'll try to drop that link in there. But Jacqueline, I think she's coming to us from, I want to say Orange County, California.
There you go. Left Coast is in the house.
There we go. Right. We got Jeremy Walter, who's in the comments. So we appreciate you. Have you felt this feeling, this feeling of imposter? And I know that we all are facing it more and more these days. We live in an Instagram world. Everyone's living their best life all the time. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
If I struggle, if I have feelings of regret, if I have feelings that I didn't get enough done in the day, my car doesn't look the way that I want it to, my house doesn't look the way that I want it to, my vacation isn't as nice as somebody else's. These are all things that could really quickly lead you to feel like I'm inferior. I'm not living the life that I'm talking about in what I'm showcasing in social media, because this is more challenging. And so I'm an imposter, right? But everybody goes through challenges. We talk about it a lot here in the terms of we all have obstacles that we face, and we're all
so we like to participate, right? So if you actually feel you've experienced imposter syndrome in the past, type in #yes. Just one thing is admitting something, right? And that takes the power off of away from you. That power comes off. You know what I'm saying? So
it really helps to know that other people are experiencing that alongside you, that it's a common phenomenon. And especially when I tell people that statistic that, studies show that up to 70-80% of the population experience it, and it's more prevalent among high achievers. Well, that means if you are experiencing it yourself, you're in really good company.
Yeah. It's funny, Kris, we talked a while ago, and as you started to tell your story, because when I bring on guests, and sometimes every week Cameron and I have a huddle on the show that's coming up, and he asks me questions, and I take decent notes, but a lot of it doesn't. I don't write it down. I should, but I don't. And as you're speaking and you're telling your story, I'm like, now I know really why he's on the show here, right? Because sometimes it's hard for me to remember, but. And I think we relate a lot to each other, right? I mean, I did get to go to college, but it was art college, so I don't think it counts. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even get my full bachelor's degree. I 3 credits shy of my degree. So, we start a company and all that kind of stuff. So there's so many things, but we get forced into these, in a good way, not forced in a bad way, into these roles, and we're like, why? How could I be here? I mean, you guys know I wrote a book recently, and That's exciting. And there's imposter syndrome of that. Am I worthy? Am I deserving?
Yes.
You know, I mean, I know you say you wrote a book, obviously, and you're promoting it there, which is awesome. But we all have these things that we go through, and well, here's the question, so I want the community. Thank you, Cameron. You're amazing. There it is, double flash.
There it is.
Order your copy today.
Well,
By the way,
we'll show it again, but I figured let me throw it up there. Yeah,
I appreciate that. And listen, if you order, we're trying to up the numbers and SEO stuff. So if you put in, if you want to order the digital version, we dropped the price to 99 cents for the version of the book. You get there because that's not gonna stay like that forever. But
nice.
But make sure you order your copy. I think it's worth it. And if and when we get to see each other, I'll make sure I autograph it for you and I'll reach out and we could work something out and figure all that out. But let's move on. Type in #why, because here's what I want to ask you, Kris. Why is imposter syndrome a good sign?
Well, as I mentioned, it's happens a lot among high achievers. And so often when you start to feel those feelings of self-doubt and insecurity, it's because you're trying something new, or you're in a community or in relationship with people who are really smart and successful and they intimidate you, but from whom there's a lot to learn. Right. So often imposter syndrome, that feeling of I'm in over my head, it's a sign that there's really great opportunity in front of you, that if you push through that fear, you can accomplish something, you can learn something new, you can build valuable relationships. But if you let that fear hold you back, then you're going to miss out on those opportunities. And so what's been interesting on this journey for me personally is that once I recognize that pattern, that when I feel the most insecure, it's actually the moments when something great is about to happen or when I'm about to accomplish something. I've now learned to see it as a positive sign. And I actually get a little bit excited when I'm feeling insecure or when I'm feeling a little bit intimidated. I think, man, that means something great is about to happen.
Well, one thing that stood out to me from your earlier part of what you just said was, and something that I've tried to practice, and that's getting smarter people than me, better people than me. That's why I collaborated with Cameron, right? I think later he's going to play the little anthology of our relationship and how this landed on the LinkedIn story and this LinkedIn show, the Master Connector show. But I want to always bring people in my circle and my team and my network that are better than me in some way, because if I'm the best at everything, then it's pretty lame, right? So we want better people. But you're right, and I never thought about it that way. By doing that, now you're going to almost instinctively put imposter syndrome on you because people are better than you, and whatever it happens to be. I get imposter syndrome all the time when I see Cameron's energy and his articulateness, and I don't even know if there's such a word.
I love Ramon's Ray's thing. I love Ramon Ray's thing too, and he was like doing the other side of that. He was like, I'm on the stage with Seth Godin, and everybody's like, oh, I love Seth Godin because he's intelligent, and then Ramon Ray's like, I'm the guy with the energy. I don't want to be known as the guy, the energetic, the clown guy. I want to be known as the smart guy.
Right.
And I think everyone, and I thought that was a great example of, everybody sort of sees the grass is greener on the other side, right? And so if you can understand that, what you have, somebody else is coveting right now.
Yes.
That's a big deal. Yeah.
So often I've been in situations where exactly what you described, one person is jealous of someone and that person is jealous for the opposite reason, right? Like they're seeing your, one type of success, but they're looking at another type of success. And so the answer is we just have to appreciate what's unique about us, what makes us different. I have a non-traditional growth path of not going to college and working for a large company for a number of years before becoming an entrepreneur. And I've taken this sort of twisty, windy path that I could very easily look back and go, man, I wasted some years, or I didn't do it like some other people who clearly had a plan and executed it really well. Yeah. But all of those experiences that I had on that twisty, windy path allow me to bring something new and unique and different. And it even in many ways allowed me to write this book and offer it to other people. And so, yeah, we have to appreciate what is unique about our own story and quit trying to measure ourselves against somebody else's story.
Love that. I mean, I've always heard it. It's you're always going to be a first class somebody yourself, but a second class somebody else, right?
Yeah.
And you're never going to be as good as anyone else. So, but that's a great segue because we want to talk about how. So put a hashtag how community, and how do you reframe failure to succeed, right? So you talked about having some twisty, windy turns, which means there were some failures, there's some stumbling blocks.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So imposter syndrome is a fear of a couple of things. And one of those fears, a big fear, is the fear of failure. And in particular, failure in public, the fear of people seeing you as a failure, or, seeing you make a mistake that you worry is going to be the thing that unravels your reputation. And so one of the ways that I've learned to overcome that fear is to reframe failure as learning. Because we learn more through failure than we do from success.
100%. I heard if you're either winning or you're learning.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And that, and yes, you just articulated this mantra that I have developed, that anytime I attempt something new, there's only two possibilities. I'm either going to succeed or I'm going to learn. And so when you reframe failure that way, you take the fear of failure out of the equation. And so you essentially disarm that voice that's telling you, don't try that because you're going to fail and it's going to be bad and you're going to look horrible and people are going to lose respect for you. Well, that voice loses its power if you say, no, that's okay because failure is learning. And I'm going to gain something from it, whether I get the outcome I expected or not. I'm going to learn and I'm going to grow. And that failure is the stepping stone towards success. That my path of success is built on all the learning, the failures that led to learning on my journey.
We've talked about this, but the book Mindset by Dweck, I think it's Carol Dweck. Talking about, growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And the ones that have that growth mindset, not afraid to fail, not afraid to make mistakes, but learn from it, are gonna adapt and grow much faster than the ones that they just don't want to make a mistake because they feel like that means they're a failure. They're inadequate, right?
That's right.
No doubt about it.
That's right.
Well, we want to move into this next section here and this is great. So, where one of our pillars is being other focused, being a go-giver. We've had Bob Berg on our show. In fact, very blessed to have Bob Berg do a post promoting my book, which was crazy that
That's
he did
fantastic.
that. So grateful for that. And I know that you do coaching and you do mentoring. And so can you give us a few examples, one or two, not a ton, but of how you've helped someone you've worked with overcome the imposter syndrome?
Oh man. I remember distinctly a story. I was talking with a young entrepreneur who had founded his company right out of college, and he had landed some money from a big name investor, like somebody who, if I said his name, everybody would know who this is. And he was giving me sort of the sales pitch version of his company. He was telling me all the great things that were happening and all the possibilities. But I could sense that behind that sales pitch, there was some fear, some insecurity, some anxiety going on. And so what I did was I started opening up to him a little bit about my story. And I told him not just my successes, but some of the fears and insecurities and struggles that I've had as an entrepreneur. I just got real honest with him about my journey. And he teared up. His eyes started welling up and he said, Kris, this is the first real conversation I've had with anyone about how hard this is. And so he was in that comparison trap. He was trying to measure up to other successful entrepreneurs, including me. He was trying to show me that he was successful and that everything was going great. And when I was vulnerable, when I opened up to him, I essentially extended him a lifeline. Because that voice of the imposter, that inner critic, was just wearing him out about you're not good enough, you're not good enough. And when he saw in me somebody that also struggled and made mistakes and yet built a great business and had success along the way, suddenly it just released him from that pressure to be perfect. And so I've learned the power of vulnerability, of being real. And I know you guys talk about that a lot
All
on
the
this
time.
show.
Yeah.
And it's a way that you can help others when you recognize the imposter working on them, when you recognize that inner critic wearing them out and them struggling. If you just open up and tell a little bit of your story and open the door to vulnerability, it's so powerful. And he and I have both never forgotten that moment and that conversation, and we've both told that story dozens and dozens of times.
That's great, Kris. It's interesting, right? So I've never thought of it in the way you just described it, as a kind of a tactic, and not manipulative, but just a way in which you can kind of break walls down.
Yeah.
But I've definitely experienced it, and I experienced it to a point where I said to myself, I'm going to do this in every conversation, as many conversations as I can. Because why not? Like, if I know that it works, that's why every connect call I do, and we've had one, right? I'm going to talk about those vulnerabilities, those pieces, those insecurities, those, I can get authentic with you, right? That's one of our pillars, right? Connecting authentically. And by doing that, number one, it makes me, by doing it, it's if I'm doing all this mental energy and to try to get myself to feel great, but I don't really feel great, then it's defeating its own purpose. So by being vulnerable, and now what happens is the person I'm speaking with, they build me up, right? Because they don't want to see somebody be kind of in a place. And I see Cameron does this to me all the time. He's like, don't do that. You're amazing, right? And there's a difference between being vulnerable and self-effacing, and he's talked to me about that. Again, Cameron has been a mentor in many ways to me that way. But being vulnerable is so important. I recommend doing it as often as possible.
I talk about it all the time with staff. It's a part of our training process because it's hospitality. I think, there's a line between being vulnerable, letting people know how you really feel, and there is some nuance in the communication. You want to be the hero of your story. That doesn't mean the Instagram version of yourself in the sense of everything's wonderful,
right? But
you want to express, if you're having a challenge with something, this is what we've all had, and you've mentioned it, Kris, and Steve, you talked about your challenges with school and feeling like, are you on top? And so, my life's mission is education and mentorship. And I can feel automatically like an imposter, and I often do when I'm in those situations and I'm talking to a high school student about, hey, I need you to do X, Y, Z so you can set yourself up for the future. Because when I tell my story, I dropped out of high school, even after completing all 4 years, which sounds crazy. And then had a child at 19 years of age, and then got into college, getting serious, and then dropped out of college. So I'm like, what are you talking about, mister? Do it the right way, finish college the right way. But it's because of those experiences that I'm so impassioned, and I have such a broad set of insight because I've spent so much time researching and digging into it and becoming an expert on what I can, that I know a lot more than most people know about college and the different colleges that you can go to and the ways that you can afford that and the way that you can actually get impact on it. I interviewed a gentleman this morning that's thinking about being an intern. And it's really interesting if you got a young person that's going to college, and I was just speaking to this person, and talk about imposter. We're set up. This guy's in a program. He's paying money. He has a goal. He has something that he wants to do. He's spending zero time doing the things that are directly associated with his goal. He's spending money and time on getting an education, but it's not tied to what he's actually doing. And a lot of people are nervous and shy about, well, I want to work in this area over here that's big and bright, and there's stars and big names. And listen, if you want to go there, you got to be there. And you can't sit there and say you're not worthy of it. You can't sit there and say you're inferior, that you're not. You got to do all these million steps before you climb that mountain, because you don't start to climb that mountain until you actually start to climb that mountain. And the
That's
first
right.
step is going there. And so, my wife is guilty of it. I think we, all have loved ones that are sitting there. I don't speak English well enough. I don't do this well enough. And I got to do all these different things in order for me to No, my friend, if you want to get there, start the journey. It may mean working for free or very little, or, paying your dues, so to speak, but you're going to be a lot closer to that goal if you're actually in where you want to be.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, good stuff. Well, we want to get to the last question here. So, we're all about building community and growing connections. And so type in hashtag community, community, right? Viewers that are watching this, right? So here's a question, and we're going to kind of bring this home. So what's the best way to determine whether your community works for you or against you?
This is a great question. And it piggybacks right off of the conversation we just had about vulnerability, because I have learned to use vulnerability as a test. So let me set the stage here. One of the keys is of a healthy community is vulnerability, because if you're in a community where everybody's got their game face on, everybody is sort of putting their best foot forward and projecting the best version of their self and their work, and no one is willing to admit that there's any flaws or weaknesses, well, that community is going to feed your imposter syndrome. It's going to make you feel like everybody's got it all together and I know that I don't, and so I must be the only one who's struggling here. But in a community where there is vulnerability, that's going to actually help diminish your imposter syndrome. When other people, just like we talked about, the conversation I had with that young entrepreneur and interacting with people, when you are willing to be open with someone, you give them confidence because they recognize now that oh, it's not a big difference between me and you, and we're on the same playing field, and struggle is part of the process, and failure is part of the journey of success. And so community is such an important, vulnerability is such an important aspect of community. And so here's what I've learned. When I enter a new community, let's say I join a networking organization, or I go to a conference for the first time, or I'm getting introduced to a group of people, I will actually lead with vulnerability as a test. And if those people respond with walls and defenses, and I see them putting their masks on and saying, oh, that's not my problem, or I don't know what that's all about, then I know that it's a community where vulnerability is not the norm, and that they're not going to be willing to break down those walls and get honest. But more often what happens is when I get vulnerable, when I just right out of the gate admit that I struggle with something, or I'm working in some area that I feel like I'm in over my head, or there's something I don't know that I want to learn. When I do that, so often someone else will say, I'm so glad you said that because I feel that way too. Or maybe they'll say, that's not my struggle, but I struggle with this over here. And if you'll help me with this, I'll help you with that. And I know how we can work on these things together. And so when you lead with vulnerability, you find out really quickly whether you're in a community that is going to be vulnerable and therefore is going to serve you well and be healthy, or if vulnerability is an affront to them, and if they get really defensive and back off, then you just know that that's a community that is not going to be safe and that you don't want to invest a lot of your time and energy in.
I love that. I've never thought about that, but that's a great way to do it, just to throw your vulnerability, see the reaction. I love that.
Yeah.
Looks like Cameron has posted up for the listeners that they can get a free chapter of your book, The Overcoming the Imposter by.
Yeah, definitely click in the link there, folks. If you like what Kris is talking about and you want to dig deeper into this, or you have somebody that that's dealing with this. My children deal with this. My loved ones deal with this. And I think it's a real deal. And I think, I don't always agree with the doom and gloom scenarios out there. We're definitely dealing with something with climate change, as I addressed earlier in the show. That's a real thing. But when people say, kids are not talking to their parents anymore because of social media, I'm like, Did you talk to your dad that worked 60 hours when you were, like, I mean, like,
Yeah.
these are, made up kind of stuff. It's just a different day and a different obstacle, but it's not really a real thing. But what I will say, and I think is, and there's some health studies out there. We're all affected by the social media thing. Kids are growing up with it. My daughter got 3 different social media apps that she's scrolling through regularly, and dad is a pain in the butt if he mentions it, but she knows she scrolls. And does it affect her mentally? There's no way that you can do something for a half an hour or more a day and it doesn't affect you mentally somehow, right? And this about being a light and having a good morning routine and all that kind of stuff. These things have become a part of people's routines, and the Instagram effect, whether it's TikTok effect, whatever we're just going to call it, but we know what we're talking about when we say Instagram, and looking at other people's fabulous lives and fabulous vacations and fabulous dance moves and fabulous this, fabulous that, and then comparing ourselves. We know that's a dangerous game that we don't want to play.
Yes.
Yeah.
2 things I want to say about what you just mentioned. One, first of all, the sample chapter that is provided at the link you shared is not chapter 1, where all I do is set up the problem and not give you any solutions. It's actually the 7th chapter in the book, and it's one of the best. I think it's the best chapter in the book, and it stands on its own really well. So I want people to know that's a valuable chapter, even if you don't buy the book. It's not a teaser that you have to go buy the book to figure out what it means. So please go download that. Secondly, you mentioned kids, Cameron, and one of the, I wrote this book primarily to entrepreneurs and business leaders, and there's a lot of entrepreneurial stories in it. And that's the audience I had in mind. But one of the great joys that I have had since this book came out is I've had so many people send me pictures of their kids reading this book. 10, 11, 12 years old, reading this book. And oh my goodness, it just warms my heart, because it gives me so much joy to think about these kids learning to recognize the voice of self-doubt early in life and getting the tools they need to counteract it and to recognize the comparison trap that you just talked about, Cameron.
Kris, let me just chime in on that. If you think your kids aren't interested, so I've read to my children Go Giver. I've read to my children several, the shorter, a little bit more interesting. Go Giver's one of those. It's a little bit shorter, has some storytelling.
It's a great story.
They are all over it. They're all over these business books. So I encourage you.
Who Moved My Cheese is a good one for kids.
Yeah, if you listen, if you don't think they're going to be into it, give it a try. I guarantee you, especially if you do a little bit of, what did you think of that? What did that make you think about? You do a little bit of engagement afterwards. Oh man, they're be careful. On a weeknight, you may not, want to stop that conversation.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes.
But we got to close things down here, but I want to.
That's true.
Yeah. So let's just a big thanks to Cameron's company. You flash that up there, sir. There you go.
Oh,
I know he's humble about it, but thank you that we couldn't have the show without our sponsor. And thank you, Kris. Please tell the audience, our community, best way to get you, and anyone other than they download that chapter, which I highly recommend. Any other call to action?
Yeah. So I'm easy to find if you remember that my name starts with a K, Kris Kelso, and I am there on LinkedIn, Facebook, all the social media, as well as kriskelso.com. And you can find out all about the book and my course and those kind of things at overcomingtheimposter.com. Excuse me.
Yeah, you're good. Yolanda's chiming in here. We had a couple of our kids get together in Texas, and she has a very, very eloquent, young, dapper young gentleman that's coming up with her, so she knows what she's talking about. Jacqueline's chiming in here. I'm not a parent, but I'm passionate about the relations to learn these invaluable things. Yeah, listen, I don't care if you got nieces, nephews, this kind of stuff. It is, it makes an impact. As Steve and I are talking to people, and we got some young people that are, auditioning to be interns with us. I could say from personal experience, even if I didn't have children,
Yeah.
The children need it, my folks. The children
Big
need
time.
it.
Yes. Yes.
The children need it. All right, gentlemen, we're going to close things out as we always do. Same time, same bad channel next week, June 14th. Owning who you are. Very similar kind of piece here to follow this up with. So we encourage you, if you enjoyed this week, come back and join us next week with Courtney Hemsley. I'm going to post that link in the chat. That's next week, same bad time, same bad channel. And I encourage you to register now and tell a friend if you enjoyed it. And then we're going to end things like we always do with our countdown to crush it. So get your fingers ready. If you're on
as we get our fingers ready, I just want to say, listen, you are enough. You are great. And listen, go shine your light. That's it. We want to be the light, but light inside a cardboard box. Nobody sees it. It's only lighting inside that box. So go be the light to the world and tell and show people that light, right? Because you are amazing. So, all right, yeah, let's count down to crush it, Kris. We're gonna hold up our fingers and start with 5 and count down to 1, and then we're gonna punch the screen. If you could break your screen if you want, but punch the screen and we'll shout out crush it at the end there. So, and community, please feel free to participate as well. Cameron, we have
I was like making I usually have my Be the Light.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, my Be the Light, what do you call it? A ticker across the bottom, but for some reason it disappears. So
it might have been because I was running the show without you.
I don't know. But anyways, I was like, Be the Light. I was like, where is this thing? Because this is our common theme. So yes, we're going to count down and crush it, my folks. Get your fingers ready. If you're in the audience, get ready to type it into the comments. We appreciate you. Here we go.
Ready?
Wait, where's my?
I probably screwed that up too, Cameron.
It's got to be here somewhere. Yeah, there it is. All right.
All right.
And I see it.
There we go.
So
ready?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Crush it.
And that's without a whole lot of practice. We did pretty good. All right, gentlemen, ladies that are watching, my master connectors. We'll see you next week. Kris, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Fire, bringing the energy. People loved it. You can see they're counting down to crush it in the comments. See you next week. Same bad time, same bad channel.